Get up! You can't sleep here! This is private property! The security guard's voice cut through the night as he jabbed his baton roughly against the elderly man's ribs. When Walter Jenkins didn't respond quickly enough, still trapped between troubled sleep and confused wakefulness, the guard unholstered his taser with practiced arrogance. "I warned you," he sneered. A blinding flash, a sharp crackle, and the old veteran convulsed violently on the cold concrete. Minutes later, as the guard smugly completed his incident report, two unmarked black Chevy Suburbans with government plates screeched to a halt. Men in tactical gear bearing discreet Pentagon rapid response insignias poured out with military precision. Walter Jenkins, 73, carried invisible burdens heavier than the weathered army rucksack that contained his only possessions. His nights were restless, haunted by fragmented memories of Vietnam jungle patrols and the faces of fallen brothers from a war most Americans preferred to forget. He hadn't chosen homelessness. It had chosen him through a merciless chain of events, his beloved wife Sarah's cancer treatments that drained their modest savings, followed by age discrimination that pushed him from one minimum wage job to another until even those opportunities dried up. The PTSD, which the VA had acknowledged but never properly treated, was his constant unwelcome companion. Walter had found a sheltered alcove behind Macy's department store, a spot usually overlooked by night patrols. There he would unroll his thin bedroll and search for a few precious hours of peace from both the city's relentless noise and the deeper turmoil that lived within him. His possessions were few but precious: a dog-eared Bible, clean socks, a soldier's obsession, a dented coffee mug, and carefully wrapped in oilcloth, his honorable discharge papers and the Bronze Star he'd earned for valor in circumstances he never discussed. As sleep finally claimed him, Walter murmured names only he remembered, comrades who had never made it home to grow old. Randy Briggs, night security for Macy's, was 26, bored and intoxicated by the small authority his uniform provided. He viewed the city's homeless not as fellow humans fallen on hard times, but as vermin to be cleared from the vicinity of the pristine establishment he protected. He particularly enjoyed the weight of the utility belt around his waist and the respect, or was it fear, it seemed to command. Spotting Walter huddled in the alcove during his 3 a.m. patrol, Briggs saw not a vulnerable elderly veteran but an eyesore, a problem to be handled. He approached aggressively, boots striking the pavement with deliberate force. "Hey, wake up!" he shouted, jabbing Walter roughly with his heavy maglite flashlight. Walter jolted awake, heart hammering against his ribs. For one terrifying moment, he was back in the jungle, under attack. The sudden jab and shout triggered a response honed by combat, flight or fight, but his aged body couldn't respond as it once had. He tried to sit up, blinking against the harsh beam directed into his face. What is it?" he stammered, still caught between decades, unsure which threat he was facing. "This is private property." "Old man," Briggs barked, relishing Walter's confusion. "No sleeping here. I've told you bums before, pack your trash and get out, now." Walter struggled to gather his wits, to pull himself fully into the present. "Just trying to get some rest, not hurting anyone." "You're hurting the image of this establishment," Briggs retorted, puffing out his chest, "and you're not moving fast enough." He unclipped the taser from his belt, the black plastic device menacing in the dim light. Walter's eyes widened in recognition. He'd seen tasers used, knew the incapacitating agony they could inflict. "Please," he said, raising a weathered hand in a placating gesture. "No need for that. I'm going. Just give me a second." But Briggs was past listening, intoxicated by his perceived power and the thrill of dominance over someone who couldn't fight back. "You had your warning, vagrant," he sneered as Walter slowly tried to push himself to his feet, arthritic fingers fumbling for his rucksack. Without further warning, Briggs deployed the taser. The twin barbs struck Walter in the chest, delivering an excruciating electrical shock that seized his entire body. He cried out, a sound that would have broken harder hearts than Briggs possessed, before collapsing back onto the concrete, every muscle convulsing in agony. Briggs watched with a cruel smirk, Taser still aimed. "Maybe next time you'll listen," he muttered, then turned to retrieve his incident report log from his belt. As Walter lay on the cold ground, tremors still racking his body, the acrid smell of ozone filling his nostrils, Briggs casually began to fill out his report, embellishing details to justify his excessive force. Subject was non-compliant, potentially aggressive, resisted removal. He felt a surge of satisfaction. He'd handled the situation efficiently, decisively. He didn't bother to check on Walter's condition beyond a cursory glance. The old man was just another problem solved, another undesirable removed from the pristine shopping district. What Briggs couldn't know, what would soon shatter his smug certainty, was that Walter Jenkins, despite his current circumstances, was not entirely forgotten by the institutions he had once served with unflinching loyalty. Years earlier, after a particularly severe PTSD episode had landed Walter briefly in a VA psychiatric facility, a compassionate social worker had enrolled him in a pilot program specifically designed for high-risk, isolated veterans. Part of that program involved a small, discreet personal locator beacon disguised as an ordinary keychain fob, to be activated only in dire emergencies, physical attack, medical crisis with no other help available. As the taser barbs hit him, Walter's convulsing hand had reflexively clenched around the fob in his pocket, his thumb pressing the recessed activation button in a spasm of agony. The signal, silent and invisible to Briggs, transmitted directly to a highly secured monitoring station within a specialized unit at the Pentagon. The Veterans Immediate Safeguard and Tactical Oversight Unit, VISTA, was a small classified team created to respond to extreme emergencies involving veterans with unique service histories, or those deemed particularly vulnerable due to unresolved trauma, linked to classified operations. Walter Jenkins' file, with its record of distinguished service in clandestine units and his current high-risk status, flagged his distress signal as a Level 1 priority, immediate on-site response required. Within 60 seconds of activation, Visto had his exact GPS coordinates, a basic visual from the nearest city traffic camera showing Briggs standing over a prone figure, and had dispatched the closest available asset, a covert emergency response team that happened to be on standby less than 10 minutes away, engaged in an unrelated urban training exercise. Briggs was still smugly writing his report, Walter groaning softly on the ground, when the first black unmarked Suburban with government plates screeched to a halt at the end of the alley, its headlights cutting through the darkness. Before Briggs could even register the first vehicle, a second identical Suburban pulled up, blocking the other end of the narrow service alley. Doors flew open and 4 figures emerged, moving with a speed and lethal efficiency that spoke of elite training. They wore dark, nondescript tactical gear with no obvious military insignia, but their posture, their movements, the way they scanned their surroundings, left no doubt about their capabilities. These were not local police, not even SWAT. Briggs straightened up, startled, his hand instinctively going to his now much less impressive utility belt. "Hey, this is private property, identify yourselves," he blustered, trying to regain control of a situation rapidly slipping away from him. The team leader, a tall, lean man with eyes that seemed to miss nothing, ignored Briggs completely. His gaze immediately found Walter on the ground. Target acquired, code Nightingale. He spoke quietly into his headset. Medical assist required. 2 team members immediately moved to Walter's side, one a trained combat medic who began assessing him with swift professionalism, cutting away the taser wires, checking vitals. The team leader then turned his attention to Briggs, his expression unreadable but radiating an icy calm that was far more intimidating than any shout. "You are Officer Briggs, private security for Macy's department store?" he asked. his voice level, almost conversational. "Yeah, that's right," Briggs said, trying to sound authoritative. "And this vagrant was trespassing. I had to use necessary force to subdue him. He was resisting." The team leader just stared at him for a long moment. Necessary force? Subdue a sleeping elderly man by deploying a conducted electrical weapon directly to the chest? He took a step closer. "We have the incident on satellite thermal, Officer Briggs."
"Including your subdual."
Briggs' bravado began to crumble. "Satellite thermal? Who are you people?" He wouldn't leave. He was non-compliant. The Visto medic looked up from Walter. "Subject is disoriented, tachycardic, experiencing muscle spasms consistent with CEDU deployment. He's elderly, appears malnourished." This was excessive force by any standard. The team leader nodded curtly. "Officer Briggs, you are to remain here. Do not attempt to leave. Do not touch your communications devices. You will be speaking with representatives from the Department of Defense, the Department of Veterans Affairs, and likely local law enforcement regarding aggravated assault on a federally protected veteran." Federally protected, Department of Defense. Briggs felt a wave of genuine fear wash over him. This was spiraling far beyond a simple trespass report. As the Visto medic continued to stabilize Walter, preparing him for transport not to a local hospital, but to a secure military medical facility as per Nightingale protocol, the team leader, whose call sign was Wraith, made another call on his encrypted satellite phone. "Wraith to Watchtower. Nightingale is secure, condition stable but requires immediate level 2 medical. Perpetrator detained on site. Requesting full liaison package, DoD Legal Virginia Protective Services, and local LEO interface. Also activate asset reclamation protocol for Sergeant Walter Jenkins. Serial number." He read Walter's old service number from a data file on his wrist device. "Full benefits restoration, immediate secure housing placement." On the other end, at the Pentagon, gears were already turning at lightning speed. Asset reclamation was a rarely used protocol reserved for veterans whose past classified service made their current vulnerable state a potential security risk, or simply for those whom the highest levels deemed had been catastrophically failed by the systems meant to protect them. Briggs watched, stunned into silence, as a third black vehicle, this one clearly an ambulance but with no civilian markings, pulled silently into the alley. Walter, now on a gurney, still dazed but conscious, was carefully loaded into it. Before the doors closed, Wraith leaned in. "Sergeant Jenkins, you're safe now. We're taking you to get proper care. You're not alone anymore." Walter looked up, his eyes focusing with difficulty on the insignia-less tactical gear, but something in the man's voice, the quiet competence, resonated with memories of brotherhood forged in fire. He managed a weak nod. The fallout was swift and severe, though mostly kept out of the public eye due to the sensitive nature of Walter's past service and Visto's involvement. Briggs was arrested by local police later that morning, charged with aggravated assault and misuse of a weapon. Macy's faced a massive lawsuit from the VA and a separate civil rights investigation initiated by the Department of Justice. Their security contract was immediately terminated, and their stock price took a significant hit when an anonymous but clearly well-informed tip about gross mistreatment of a highly decorated special operations veteran leaked to an influential Wall Street Journal financial journalist. Walter Jenkins recovered slowly at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. He was diagnosed with severe PTSD, malnutrition, and complications from the Taser deployment, but his underlying resilience, the same grit that had seen him through combat, began to reassert itself. The Visto team, true to their word, enacted the asset reclamation protocol. Within days, Walter was moved into a comfortable, fully furnished apartment in a secure complex for retired military personnel in Alexandria, Virginia. His full pension and disability benefits, which had been snarled in red tape for years, were retroactively reinstated and expedited. A dedicated VA case manager was assigned to him, ensuring he received top-tier medical and psychological care. He even got a new service dog, a calm German shepherd named Liberty. Rafe visited him once before Walter was fully settled. Sergeant Major, he said Walter had been promoted posthumously on paper after being declared MIA years ago, a fact resurrected by the protocol. Your country failed you. We are trying to make that right. Your service was never forgotten, even if you were for a time. Walter, sitting in a comfortable armchair looking out at a small garden, simply nodded, a lifetime of pain and endurance in his eyes, but also, for the first time in many years, a glimmer of peace. His story was an extreme case, a confluence of forgotten protocols and a desperate last resort, but it served as a stark reminder within certain quiet corridors of power that the nation's debt to its defenders doesn't end when the uniform comes off, and that sometimes the most powerful response to injustice isn't a shout, but the swift, silent arrival of those who still honor the code, because even in the deepest darkness, a distress signal can be heard, and for some the cavalry in whatever modern form it takes will indeed arrive.